Let's get to our 5 headlines. Number one, early voting is underway, and record turnouts are being reported. Here's a story from the News Times. It says, with less than 3 weeks to go before the November 3rd election, more than 14 million Americans have voted in the fall election, reflecting an extraordinary level of participation, despite barriers being erected by the coronavirus pandemic. In Georgia this week, voters waited as long as 11 hours to cast their ballots on the first day of early voting. In North Carolina, nearly 1 in 5 of roughly 500,000 who have returned mail ballots did not vote in the last presidential election. In Michigan, more than 1 million people have already voted. And then it goes on to say much of the early voting seems to be driven by enthusiasm among Democrats. So, you could believe that or not, take it with a grain of salt. I know a lot of my listeners maybe don't want to hear this, but there does appear to be a lot of enthusiasm among voters who hate Trump and want him gone. This is what I expected. I expected a massive anti-Trump turnout. That's gonna happen. It didn't happen in 2016. There was not a massive anti-Trump turnout, and I think part of the reason for that is that everyone thought he'd lose anyway, and also because Hillary Clinton was so just unappealing as a human being. You might say Biden is unappealing too, but it's not to the level of Hillary. Nobody is at the level of Hillary Clinton when it comes to being viscerally unappealing, right? So that's the way things are trending. The good news is that the election isn't over yet. There are still 3 weeks to go. But as I've been saying for a long time now, Trump needs to do something, make some kind of pitch, have some kind of strategy to mobilize other than just the MAGA crowd. Yeah, you need the MAGA crowd. You've already got them. That's good. You're going to need more than that. There aren't enough people who wear MAGA hats to win the election. You cannot, that's your base, that's your core supporters. Great. You need more than that. He needs to reach the sorts of people who don't love him personally, maybe don't even like him personally, but also don't like the Democrats, and right now are trying to decide, and I could be wrong, this is just my guess. My guess is that there are a lot of people right now who are undecided only because, not because they're trying to choose between Trump and Biden, they're trying to choose between voting for Trump or not voting at all. And so Trump needs to have some sort of a strategy for mobilizing and reaching out to those voters who are on the fence right now between not voting at all or voting for him. He has to give them a reason to vote for him. He needs to make those voters feel better about voting for him. He needs to do something. And his normal routine with the rallies and the tweeting and everything, that's not going to be enough. And so I am worried about this. I'm worried that 3 weeks from the election, I have no idea what the Trump campaign strategy is, other than just do all the same stuff he always does. That's not a campaign strategy. That's a campaign strategy for the people who are already excited about you. I don't know what his strategy is for the other million, that whole pool of millions of people who are gettable. You can get them, but they're not going to come to a rally because they're not that excited. What is his strategy for those? Do you know? Does anyone know? It doesn't seem like there is one. And that worries me. I know Trump kind of ad-libbed his way to the win in 2016. Very impressive. I don't think we should assume it's going to happen a second time. Conditions are very different. So I'm concerned about that. Number two, during day 3 of the hearing yesterday, Wednesday, there was a moment from Amy Coney Barrett that if she were a liberal, I'll play this for you because if she were a liberal, this moment would already be turned into merchandise and T-shirts and bumper stickers and everything else. Here it is. Listen to this.
To be clear, as I said, I think in response to this question yesterday, I do share Justice Scalia's approach to text, originalism and textualism. But in the litany of cases that you've just identified, the particular votes that he cast are a different question of whether I would agree with the way that he applied those principles in particular cases. And I've already said, and I hope that you aren't suggesting that I don't have my own mind or that I couldn't think independently or that I would just decide let me see what Justice Scalia has said about this in the past, because I assure you I have my own mind. But everything that he said is not necessarily what I would agree with or what I would do if I were Justice Barrett. That was Justice Scalia. So I share his philosophy, but I've never said that I would always reach the same outcome as he did.
I assure you I have my own mind, she says. That was a good moment from Barrett. I'm not saying that I think it was some kind of epic smackdown of some sort, but or any kind of empowering feminist anthem. I'm saying that in our vapid culture, if Barrett was liberal, that's how it would be seen. I mean, during the vice presidential debate, Kamala Harris said, I'm speaking, and feminists turned that into, the most brilliant comeback in the history of debates. They turned it into a shirt, like right away. You see the shirt here. So that's the way that goes. Meanwhile, another moment from the hearings, this one was also seized upon by the left in an incredibly dishonest way. I know that won't surprise you, but first watch this.
Do you think Brown versus Board of Education's super precedent is that you're not aware of any effort to go back to the good old days of segregation by a legislative body? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so what's the news there? Not immediately obvious to a normal person. You see that and you think, okay, what's the problem? Well, they're making a big deal out of the fact that Lindsey Graham said good old days of segregation. Obviously sarcastically, in the same vein that somebody might say when they're told they need a root canal by the dentist, they might say, oh, great. Does anyone, you hear that? Do you think, oh, that person must love root canals? Or, if someone says, oh, just what you run into traffic and you say, just what I need. The way the left is responding to what Lindsey Graham, I guess if they were in the car with you, they would think, why do you need traffic? What are you talking about? Doesn't compute. So here's Jamie Harrison, Graham's opponent in South Carolina. He said, Lindsey Graham just called segregation the good old days. The good old days for who, Senator? It's 2020, not 1920. Act like it. And then there are articles like this in Mediaite. It says, Senator Lindsey Graham raised eyebrows during his questioning of Judge Amy Coney Barrett when he asked the Supreme Court nominee how much confidence she has in the landmark Brown versus Board of Education. How much confidence she has in, I don't know, this is phrased. Anyway, if she was asked if this was a super precedent, Brown versus Board of Education. Anyway, it says, curiously, however, Senator Graham, who finds himself in a hotly contested re-election, also asked if it also referred to the good old days of segregation. The article says, wait, what? Good old days of segregation? I mean, he could have been joking, despite the lack of any facial cue or body language suggesting sarcastic hyperbole. However, Senator Graham got a lot of attention during a recent debate with his political foe, Jamie Harrison, when he said that young black people and immigrants could go anywhere in South Carolina, but added, you just need to be conservative. And then it goes on from there. To call this merely bad faith would be a massive understatement. Yeah, I'm sure you're really confused about this, aren't you? Well, I don't know. Was he serious or not? I have no idea. Maybe he was really openly and publicly reminiscing in a favorable way about segregation while on TV in a Supreme Court hearing during an election. He could have been. Who knows? Okay, let's see here. There was one other thing. One other thing I wanted to mention from the hearings that I didn't get a chance to yet. This article from CNN, headline is, Amy Coney Barrett says she owns a gun, but could fairly judge a case on gun rights. Obvious implication is she can't. If you own a gun, how can you be fair in judging a case on gun rights? All I'm going to say in response to this is imagine during the Sonia Sotomayor confirmation in 2009, imagine the following headline. Sonia Sotomayor says she's a woman, but could fairly judge a case on women's rights? Something tells me, I sort of doubt that we would have ever seen that headline. I don't think we did. I could go back and check. Number 3, scary stuff here. Tommy Lee, former rock star, speaking with The Big Issue, has said that he might leave the country if Trump is reelected. Here he is. He says, dude, I swear to God, if that happens, then I'm coming over to visit the UK. I'm out of here. I'll go back to my motherland, go back to Greece, and get a house on one of the islands. And then he goes on from there talking about how bad Trump is. To me, the big headline here is that Tommy Lee is still alive. I honestly thought that he died years ago. I'm not trying to be funny. I really thought that. So congratulations to Tommy Lee, first of all, on not being dead. As far as him leaving the country, well, now that I know he's still alive, I couldn't bear to lose him again. I can't lose him twice. In fact, I'll probably vote for Biden just to keep Tommy Lee here. I am now a single issue voter, and my issue is making sure Tommy Lee does not leave us, because I don't want to live in a country like that. I don't know about you. Number 4, here is it's always tough when you take a politician like Kamala Harris and you try to make her seem human. And but Rachel Maddow, MSNBC, they did what they could to get a human moment out of Kamala Harris, and here's how that went.
I just realized that I would kick myself if I didn't just ask you before I let you go if you noticed the fly on Vice President Pence's head at the time during the debate, or if that was something that only we could see it at home. Could you see it sitting next to him? Did you have feelings about, like, did you have the instinct to?
You know, Rachel, I think that it's important that we kind of find a way, all of us, to move on and, kind of fly away from this subject onto something else. Yeah.
Senator Harris, you are very kind. And let's just spare a thought right now for the people who have to write closed captions for this portion of the interview, and for those who have to transcribe it, because they're going to have no idea how to convey what we just communicated.
It makes my skin crawl, doesn't it? It's almost as bad as Hillary Clinton trying to pretend to be, not a robot. That's tough to watch, tough to get through. Okay, number 5, my producer sent me this story. I haven't read it ahead of time. I never read this stuff ahead of time, if you can't tell. But here's the story from the Bristol Post. It seems promising. Headline is, "Man who farted in Uber ends up in court." And then says, let's see, breaking wind in the back of an Uber taxi cost a man a suspended jail term. But the repercussion for the taxi driver was that he has to return to his native Bulgaria. Drunken James Mallet let rip as Alexander Bonchev was driving him to Chaser's nightclub in Kingswood. Bristol Crown Court heard it was the final straw for the cabbie, who, after suffering abuse from other fares, told Mallet to get out of the vehicle because he farted, so get out of the vehicle. And at that point, Mallet began hitting the driver, and so then there was a fight. Okay, so he's not going to jail for farting in the Uber. He's going to jail for first he farts in the Uber, it sounds like, and then he starts beating up the Uber driver. Insult to injury there, and so that's what gets him prosecuted. So I was hoping. Listen, I would be fully in favor of a law that penalizes people for flatulence in certain scenarios. I think in an Uber, is one big one. On a plane, I have in the past shared my own experience. We've all had experiences like this. Sitting next to someone with chronic flatulence, it's biological warfare. You shouldn't allow biological terrorism, especially on a plane. And so I'd be in favor of prosecution in circumstances like that. Sounds like that's not what happened here, but it gives us something to aspire to in any way. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.